Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Sadi Vav. Hahu tanura da'atachu ba tichya, asra rabba bar ahilai, lemichla lirifta le'olam, va'afilu b'milha, dilmate lemechle bekutha. There was a certain oven that was smeared with animal fat, kosher animal fat, but still it's meat. And then Rabba bar ahilai prohibited anyone from using that oven to bake bread forever, even if you eat the bread with salt, meaning without anything else, in which case, well, so you cook the bread in the oven, and remember, with bread, you stick it to the side, and it absorbs the taste of the meat fat, so now it's meat bread. That's still kosher, but still he said it's prohibited even to eat the bread by itself. Why? Because one may come to eat it with kutach, which is a dairy yogurt dish. Usually people, they see bread, they assume that it's parv, and they're going to eat it with meat or they eat it with milk. And you can't make bread that's going to be meat bread or milk bread generally. And this fat then is stuck into the wall, and he said, le'olam. He said, this oven is prohibited forever to bake bread. You can use it for meat, like a meat pot. You can use it for meat, to cook meat in it. That's fine, but you can't cook bread in it. We have a challenge against Rabba bar ahilai from a baraita, from which we're going to learn in the second part. It seems that it's possible to kosher an oven that had meat in it, and we're assuming now it's an earthenware oven. The Braita teaches, En lashine ta'isa behalav, ve'im lash kol hapat kula asura, mipnei hergel avera. You cannot knead dough with milk, and if you did, then it's prohibited. That bread is prohibited. Why? Because you're going to be accustomed to sin. People are not going to realize that it's dairy bread, and they're going to eat it with meat, and then they're eating. This is not worse than the absorption of taste, because here you have actual milk that was kneaded into the dough, and then you're actually eating meat and milk together, and therefore you're not allowed to make dairy bread. This is a halacha until today, unless you do some kind of sign that it's small, it's shaped in a different way, like English muffins, which are dairy. So you could have dairy bread as long as there's something noticeable about it. It's different from regular bread, but otherwise you're not allowed to put dairy in bread. Similarly, en tashin et hatanur be'aliyah v'im tash kol hapat kula asura ad sheyasik et hatanur. Similarly, the Braita continues, you cannot smear the inside of an oven with fat of a sheep's tail. The sheep's tail is meat. And if you did, then bread that you put into it is prohibited until you kindle the oven. Meaning, if you kindle the oven, you put the fire inside, nice and hot, and it'll burn out all of the fat that's on the surface, or that's absorbed into this, we're assuming, earthenware oven. If you do that, then you can use the oven for bread, and then the bread will be parv. What you see from this baraita is that it's possible to kosher an oven, and then the next bread that you put in it, with bake in it, will be parv. And that goes against Rabba bar ahilai, who said that this oven is that you smeared fat in is prohibited forever to bake bread in it. And there's no possibility of koshering it. Tiyubta de Rabba bar ahilai tiyubta. The baraita obviously is going to win versus the Amora, and this is a thorough rejection of Rabba bar ahilai. Amar le Ravina le Rav Asher, v'chi me'achar ditotav Rabba bar ahilai, amai amar Rav kederot bepesach yishaveru. Now Ravina asks Rav Asher, since Rabba bar ahilai was refuted, and therefore we see that the halacha should be like the baraita, that an oven can be koshered. So if that's true of an oven, we're going to assume that it should be the same thing with a pot. And we're assuming, again, an earthenware oven or an earthenware pot should be the same thing. And therefore, if you have an earthenware pot that has something prohibited in it, you should be able to kindle it to make it hot, and then it should be kosher. Well, in that case, how come Rav said that pots that were used on Pesach for Hametz. So you have Hametz she'avad alav Pesach in the pot. They have to be broken. There's no way to kosher them. We're earthenware, and therefore you have to break them. Why? Why didn't Rav teach, like this baraita, that you can make a fire and put the pot on the fire, and it will burn out the taste of the Hametz she'avad alav Pesach? Amar le Rav Mokila hahi b'shel matechet. And the answer is, Rav said that baraita, according to Rav, was talking about a metal oven. That's a metal oven that you smeared with fat from a sheep's tail. Then you heat it up. You make it very hot, and then it's koshered. That's an earthen. That's if it's metal. But Rav here is talking. This halacha is talking about earthenware pots that you cannot kosher. That's one answer. Or you could say that no, indeed, the baraita is talking about an earthenware oven, as we said all along. But there is a difference. The earthenware oven, you put the fire on the inside of the oven, where the fat was smeared. It's on the same side of where the non-kosher, it's not kosher, but it's meat, where the meat got absorbed. You're putting the fire on the same side, so it's getting very hot on the same side that it was absorbed, and that will burn out all of the absorbed taste. That's different from a pot where you kindle it from underneath. You put the fire, and then you put the pot on top on the outside. Okay, that's fine. It gets nice and hot on the outside, but the meat that you cooked in it, or that you smeared on it, was on the inside. It's on the inside surface, and the fire is on the outside surface. So that makes a difference. You can kosher something if the fire is on the same surface as the fat, but not if it's on the other side. So we ask, okay, so then why not make a fire inside the pot? Take these pots that were used on Pesach wrongly with Hametz, and make a fire inside the pot, and then that'll be the same as the fire inside the oven. And the answer is Hayis Alaihu de mitbere. No, people are concerned for their pots that they're going to break. An oven is made to make a big fire, hot fire inside, so people aren't afraid. They're going to make a nice big fire; it'll burn everything out. But pots, they're made to put the fire outside. If you tell people, make a fire inside the pot, they're going to make just a little fire. They're not going to make a nice hot fire because they're afraid it's going to break and they don't want to lose their pot. Pot is very expensive. And therefore, they're not really going to kosher it. And therefore, we cannot trust that people are actually going to do it because they're going to be worried that it's going to break. And therefore, that would be the same, it would be true for this earthenware tile. Think of it as a griddle where you put it on top of fire, and then you put some pancakes or whatever on top of it. And there also, the fire is on one side, whereas the food that you're putting it on it is on top, on the other side. And so that'd be the same thing, that you would not be able to kosher it because if you tell people to put the fire on the same side, they'd be like, we don't usually do that. And they're not going to put the fire there. And therefore, because they're afraid it will break. And therefore, they won't kosher it well. So we say, you know what, you can't kosher those things. Now we go back and we ask about the pots in the Bet HaMikdash. Why does the Torah say that they should be broken? If you have dam hatat or other things that are cooked, korbanot, that are cooked in pots, earthenware pottery, then the Torah says you have to break it. Why? Why do you have to break it? Why can't you put it in the kiln, heat it up very hot, and it'll be okay? Now, you could ask the same question we did before. But we're afraid it's going to break. That you only have to worry about at home. At home, when this person is relatively poor, he only has a couple of pots, he's going to be worried that they're going to break. In the Bet HaMikdash, we're talking about professionals. These are the Kohanim. First of all, it's not their own personal property that's being destroyed if it would break. And anyway, it's they're going to make sure they want everything to be kosher and perfect, so they're going to make it nice and hot. So they're professionals. So we're not worried that they're going to be worried about breaking their pots. they'll make a big fire even inside the pot. So therefore, for the Bet HaMikdash, should be permitted to reuse earthenware pots, and you'll kosher it with a nice big fire inside each time. There's a completely different reason. You're not allowed to make kilns in Yerushalayim. Kilns make a lot of smoke, a lot of soot, and then everything, all the walls, everything gets black from it. And Yerushalayim has a holy city, has to be a beautiful city, and therefore we can't make kilns everywhere to kosher all these pots that are going to be needed. Instead, we simply have to break them. And maybe this is the source of using Jerusalem stone all around Yerushalayim. It's a law today that everything in Yerushalayim has to be built with nice white stone to make it look beautiful. Amar Abaye, v'chi osin ashpatot ba'azara. Abaye says, yeah, but now you're replacing one problem with one solution with a different problem. And now you're going to have heaps and heaps of broken earthenware, and you're going to make Jerusalem, the courtyard, into a garbage heap, because every time you break it, if you reuse it, then you don't have to break it. So now it's going to be a garbage heap. Think about how many broken pots we're going to have to store up. Ishte mit te ha detane shemaya bekal nebo shibre kelecheres nibalin bimkoman. But Abaye seems to have forgotten the tradition that was taught by that Shemaya taught in Kal Nebo, because he said that there was a miracle in the Bet HaMikdash, that the shards of earthenware vessels miraculously were absorbed in their place. You put a pile of them, come back the next day, and they're absorbed into the ground. So the garbage did not pile up, so we didn't have to worry about that. Okay, another question. Now that we know, based on the Baraita that we started with, that you can kosher an earthenware vessel if you're willing to make it very hot, and in the Bet HaMikdash, it's okay, they're willing to make it very hot, and an oven anyway, the fire is done inside, so it should be okay. Well, then we bring back a statement that we saw on an earlier daf of Rab Nachman in the name of Rabba Bar Avu, that he said that the oven in the Bet HaMikdash was made out of metal, so that they could kosher it, and they don't have to break it and make a new one each time. Why bother making it out of metal? Make it out of earthenware, and since the fire is inside, so you can clean it out, clean out any of the taste of the meat that you cooked beforehand. Clean it out each time, burn it out, and it should be all right. Why not make it out of earthenware? And says, "Dechevan deika shetehalechem velechem apanim de'afiyatan batanur ukedushatan batanur havale keli sharet uchli sharet decheres la'abdinan." The reason, you're right. If it was only about the meat korbanot, you would be able to make it out of earthenware, and you'll make a fire and burn out the taste of the korbanot each time. The problem is that we also use this oven to bake the shtei halechem on Shavuot, and the lechem apanim that was done every week is baked in this oven. Now, these two items, shtei halechem and lechem apanim, they're not prepared in a temple vessel. Rather, in order to become kadosh, in order to become kadosh, like blood, you have to receive the blood of an animal in a temple vessel. Or for menachot, you put the flour in a temple vessel. That's how it becomes holy. But these two items are not placed in a temple vessel beforehand. Rather, it's the oven itself that serves two purposes. One, it cooks it, and second, it is the temple vessel that makes it holy. So, Kedushatan bat tanur. Since the Kedusha is in the tanur, so we need the oven to be a kli sharet, to be a temple service vessel. And we don't make a temple service vessel out of earthenware. Earthenware is cheap and not worthy. It's not respectful. Rather, earthenware vessel is made out of metal, usually gold and silver, copper, fine, but it has to be something that's metal. That's the reason why we make the oven of the temple courtyard out of metal. And even Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, who said it doesn't have to be metal, it could be other things, like wood. That's fine. Wood is also somewhat significant. But even Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, who says it could be wood, agrees that it can't be made out of earthenware, and therefore that in fact is the reason why we don't make it out of earthenware. Next, we have a fantastic story. Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda havad agil kamed Rami bar Hama. Shavke v'azil leRav Sheshat. Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda, he would regularly sit before, meaning learn from, Rami bar Hama. He was a part of Rami bar Hama's shiur. He was his teacher. Now, Rami bar Hama is well known for asking very clever, sharp questions, expert in reasoning. However, Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda one day left Rami bar Hama's class and he went to study instead with Rav Sheshat. Yom achad pega be, amar le, al kafta naktan, recha te la liyad, mishum de azalt lach lekamed Rav Sheshat, havet lach ki Rav Sheshat. One day, Rami bar Hama met Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda, and he's like, what's going on? Why did you leave my class? And he uses a well-known mashal that says, if the chief of taxes, or the duke, this is a high-level official. If a high-level official grasps me by the hand, does the fragrance of his hand come off to my hand? This is a folk expression that says, just because you are together nearby a famous, important person doesn't make you important and famous. It's like people that if they meet a star or a famous actor and they shake their hand, so I'm never going to wash my hand, as if the touching the hand of that person transfers greatness to you also. It doesn't work that way. It's making fun of social climbers, people that just want to seem like they're great by hanging around great people. The nimshal, the application here is, just because you, Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda, went and studied before Rav Sheshat, does that make you like Rav Sheshat? Yes, Rav Sheshat is a great sage, for sure. You think by going to his shiur, now you're going to be great? This happens to be true sometimes in yeshivot. There's different levels of shiurim, and sometimes students will go to the high-level shiur, whether they can understand it or not, just so they can say, oh, I'm in the high-level shiur. See, as if, if you're in the high-level shiur, there you're as great as the teacher. So you can see Rami bar Hama is very upset that the student left him. He feels upset by it. And he's saying, Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda, you went for the wrong reason. You went for your self-glory to do some social climbing. That's why you left my shiur. So that's why he's upset. However, Rav Yitzchak bar Yehuda defends himself. He says, Amar le, lav mishum achi. He says, no, that's not the reason I left your shiur. Sorry, I have a good reason that I left your shiur. Mor ki ba'ena mileta pashit li misebara ki mashkachna matnita parchala. Rav Sheshat ki ba'ena mileta mine pashit li mimatnita techi nami mashkacht matnita ufarcha matnita matnita hi. Here's why I left your shiur, Rami bar Hama. You, master, when I ask a question, you give me an answer based on reason. You figure something out. You say, this seems reasonable, this seems to be like that case. And then what happens later is I find a tradition, a Mishnah or Baraita. I find a Tanaitic source. And certainly if you have a Tanaitic source, that is going to refute reason. Reason is very good. You can prove things. It makes sense this way, that way. It could be very persuasive. But if you have a clear tradition against it, then reason is not going to override a tradition. So I ask you questions. You give me an answer based on reason. But then later on, I always often find a tradition that contradicts your reason. And that's very frustrating to learn from you. When I go to Rav Sheshat and I ask a question of him, he has a tradition, he has a Mishnah, he has a Baraita. Now, even if later on I find another Tanaitic tradition that goes against it, still it's not going to refute it because this is a Mishnah and this is a Mishnah, or this is a Tanaitic tradition and that's a Tanaitic tradition. So I'll learn, that there's two Tanaitic traditions. He gave me one, I heard another one. It doesn't refute what he says. So I want to learn from someone who knows a lot of traditions. That is more important to me. You're giving me reason. Now, Rami bar Hama happens to be. He was a great expert in reason, in very clever arguments, but that's not what the student was looking for. Amar le, be'amini mileta, divshit lach ki matnita. Rami bar Hama still won't accept it. He says, well, you don't think I could do it? Okay, test me. Ask me any question, and I will give you an answer based on a Tanaitic tradition. Be'amine, bishel b'miksat keli, ta'un medika ushtifa o en ta'un. Okay, so here's the question that Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda asks. If someone would cook a hatat offering in part of a vessel, so he only cooked on the left side of it, do you have to do medika ushtifa on the whole thing, or do you not need to do it on the whole thing? That's his question. Amar le eno ta'un midi dehava haza'ah. And Rami bar Hama says, well, it makes sense that it would not require doing scouring and washing the whole thing, but only that part of it that you used. Let's say you have a big griddle, a long griddle, and you cooked it just on one side of it. So just to scour and rinse that side, not the other side. How do I know? Because it should be the same as blood that is sprinkled on a garment. We said earlier that if blood of dam hatat is sprinkled on a garment, you only have to launder that spot. You don't have to launder the entire thing. And so therefore it makes sense that that's the same thing. Now Rav Yitzchak says, V'ha la tenachi. Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda says, but we don't have a baraita or mishnah like that. You said you're going to answer me from a tradition. You just gave me a reason. It's reasonable that this is like that, but I want an explicit tradition. Rami bar Hama says, Amar lemistabera kebeged, ma beged eno ta'on kibus ela mekom hadam af keli eno ta'on merika ushtifa ela b'mekom bishul. He says, well, it makes sense. So you see he's answering from Sevara. So Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda said in the first place, I left your shiur because whenever I ask you a question, you answer me a sevara. You don't give me a baraita. And then he says, okay, test me. And Rami bar Hama gives a sevara. He doesn't give a baraita. So he says, mistabera. So no, Rami bar Hama, this is his methodology. And so he doubles down on it and says, makes sense, it would be like a garment. Just like a garment, you only have to launder the place where the blood is. So too, regarding any vessel made out of metal, if you cook some sacrifice in it, you only have to do medika ushtifa in the place where you cooked and not the rest of it. Rav Yitzchak Bar Yehuda, the student, says back, Amar le midame dam la mefapeya bishul mefapeya. Wait, how do you know it's the same? You gave an argument. I got it. Persuasive argument. But when it comes to logic and reason, you can always find some reason why maybe it's not applicable. After all, when it comes to blood that stains a garment, it's not spreading throughout the garment. It stains that part. That's it. But when you cook something, when you're cooking, it bubbles up and it spreads. But when you cook something, it doesn't just stay in one spot, right? It gets hot, it spreads, and so there could be that for a stain in a garment, you only need that spot. But when you cook something in a vessel, maybe it does spread throughout the whole thing. So your reasoning is not foolproof. Ve'od tanya. And furthermore, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yehuda actually found a baraita. It's found in a Tosefta. And this is what he said always happens. I find another source. And here's the Tosefta. It's a long one. Chomer behaza'ah memerika ushtifa vechomer memerika ushtifa behaza'ah. There is a way in which haza'ah, that means sprinkling on a garment, that law is more stringent than medika ushtifa of a pot. And there is some way in which the scouring and rinsing of a pot is more stringent than the laundering of blood that you have to do when something is sprinkled. Let's go through all of them. The last one is going to be the one relevant for us. Chomer behaza'ah, shehaza'ah yeshna b'chataot hachitzonot b'chataot hapinimiyot. V'yeshna lifnei zirika ma she'en ken b'merika ushtifa. The sprinkling of blood on a garment has a stringency in that it applies to a case of chataot chitzoniyot, outside chatat offerings, the regular offerings, and also to chatat offerings that are offered inside. Blood of either of these types that is sprinkled onto a garment, you have to do laundering. However, the law of cooking in a pot, that only applies to chatat kisoniot. Only the outside, the chatat offerings that are sprinkled only on the outside mizbeach, those are only the ones that are eaten by the kohanim. So those have to be are going to be cooked in pots. So there, if it's cooked in a pot, then you have to make sure to do medika ushtifa in a pot. Inner chatat offerings, they're sprinkled inside, and then nobody eats it. The body of the rest of the animal is burnt outside or burnt on a fire, not cooked in a pot. So therefore, medika ushtifa does not apply to chatat pinimiyot. That's one way in which garments are more stringent than pots. And also, the law of blood applies even before the blood is sprinkled on the Mizbeach. That blood, you did shechita, you received it in a cup, and that blood goes onto a garment, you have to launder the garment. Even though, if before the blood was sprinkled, you cooked the meat, that meat is not yet ready to be cooked. It's not yet available for the Kohanim to eat. So you wouldn't need Medikan Shtifa until after you sprinkle the blood. Then, once you sprinkle the blood, the rest of the body, the flesh of the chatat offering, except for the parts that go on the mizbech, the rest of it, then you can eat only after the sprinkling of the blood. So that's a second way in which blood is laundering blood is more stringent than cleansing the pots. And now the other way around. Chomer b'medika u'shtifa. Shemedika u'shtifa noheget ben bekodshei kodashim, ben bekodashim kalim. Bishel b'miksat hakli, taon medika u'shtifa kol hakli, ma'ashen ken b'haza'ah. The medika, the cleansing of pots, is more stringent than laundering of clothes, in that the cleansing of pots with medikan shtifa, that applies both to high-level kodashim and low-level kodashim. This is the opinion of Tanakama back in our Mishnah. And also, if you cook something in part of a vessel, you have to do medikan shtifa on the entire vessel. And that's not true for blood. For blood offerings, the laundering for blood offerings applies only to a korban hatat, not for all sacrifices. And when it comes to blood laundering, you only have to wash that spot. But for pots, you have to wash the entire thing. So there you go. Here's a baraita, an explicit tosefta, that teaches that you have to wash the whole pot against the reasoning that Rami bar Hama presented. Amar le itanya tanya. Rami bar Hama says, if you have a baraita, you have a baraita. I guess my reasoning is wrong. So we see after all that, right? Why'd you leave my shiur? And Rami bar Hama accused the student of leaving the shiur to have social climbing. Oh, you want to be like Rav Sheshat? You don't think I'm good enough for you? He took a personal offense. And when he explained, no, it's because I want to learn from traditions and not based on reason. And Rami bar Hama says, okay, give me to ask me any questions. I'll give you a tradition. And then he doesn't. He does it based on reason. And you see Rami bar Hama at the end says, oh, well, you have a tradition. I guess you're right. So this shows the two different methodologies of these two shiurim. And Rami bar Hama, sticks here. That's what he's used to, and that's how he teaches, and that's his greatness. And that's his in that way. And Rav Sheshat's greatness was in being able to bring traditions. Now, actually, what is the source for this law that even if you cook in part of it, you have to do medikan shtifa on the entire pot? Amar kera ve'im b'kli nechoshet bushala afilu b'miksat kli, because the pasuk says, if in a vessel of bronze you should cook, even if it's part of the vessel. It doesn't say imkli, but bikli. If within a vessel, even if it's only part of it, you still have to do medika and shetifa on the entire vessel. Echad kodshe kodashim vechule. The Mishnah taught that according to Tanakama, both for kodshe kodashim and for kodashim kalim, when they're cooked in a pot, you have to do the scouring and the rinsing of the pot. Rabbi Shimon, however, disagrees in the Mishnah and says you only have to do it when you cook kodshe kodashim, but not for kodashim kalim. Now we're going to see the source. Tenora banan hatat. En li ela hatat kol kodashim minayin. The pasukim in Vayikra, we saw these pasukim already. 6:18 says zot Torah hatat. Makom asher tishret haolah tishret hatat. If na Adonai kodesh kadashim hi. So since it says hatat, a simple reading would be just hatat. The end of the pasuk does mention kodesh kadashim. Now chatat is an example of kodesh kadashim, but why do you need to tell me that here? This seems to be extra words, and so that's what we're going to use right now. How do you know that not only korban hatat you have to wash the whole pot, but also for other kodashim? Talmud Omar kodesh kadashim hi. That includes other kodashim. And so according to Tanakama, that includes all kodashim, kodshe kodashim, and kodashim kalim. Even though it says kodesh kodashim, according to Tanakama, it includes everything. Now, once you're including all types of sacrifices, yachol shani merabeh teruma. What if I cook teruma in a pot? Teruma is also something holy, or something only Kohanim can eat. Do I have to do medikan shetifa on the pot for teruma also? Talmud Omar otah perat litruma. That's why the pasuk, a couple of pasukim later, says Kol Zachar Bakonim Yochal Otah Kodesh Kodashim He. The word Otah is a limiting word that limits it and excludes Terumah according to the Biyuda. We learn from this Baraita that the Tanakama, anonymous in our Mishnah, is actually Rabbi Yehuda, the fourth generation Tana. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Kodesh Kodashim Teonin Mirika Ushtifa, Kodashim Kalim Enan Teonin Mirika Ushtifa, Dichtib, Kodesh Kodashim, Kodesh Kodashim In, Kodashim Kalim La. Rabbi Shimon, however, says in the Mishnah that you have to wash the pot with mirikan shtifa only for kodesh kodashim, but not for kodashim kalim. As the pasuk says, kodesh kodashim. That's what it says. Therefore, that yes, and kodashim kalim la. All right, that makes a lot of sense. It fits the words very nicely. My tama de Rabbi Yehuda midis terich otar lemutet teruma mikla de kodashim kalim teonin mirika shtifa. So then back to Rabbi Yehuda. What is his reasoning to say that kodesh kodashim includes all types of korbanot? Why does he say that? Here's why. Since we have the word otah, and you needed the word otah to exclude terumah. Well, if it excludes terumah, that means it's only excluding terumah, but not excluding kadashim kalim. So, since the pasuk comes to exclude terumah, that means everything else above terumah, including kodashim kalim, do require mirikan shetifa, and that's why he says that the word kodesh kodashim here, even though it happens to be a chatat, is kodesh kodashim, but really it means not only that, but any type of sacrifice. Rabbi Shimon amar lach otah kedamrinan. Rabbi Shimon, what is he going to do with the word otah? Now Rabbi Shimon doesn't need the word otah, since he's taking kodesh kodashim literally. It means only kodesh kodashim, and therefore not kodashim kalim, and for sure not terumah. So what is he going to use the word otah for? As we already used it before a couple of dapim ago on 93a, it said we learned otah comes to exclude an invalid korban. If the korban chatat became invalid, whether it was invalid from the beginning or became invalid afterwards, and the blood goes on the garment, you don't have to launder the garment from the word otah. So he uses it for something else. Utsuma la bayashitifa amerika. And now we ask, is that true that terumah? This is a question on both of them, because Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon both agree that terumah that is cooked in the pot, you don't have to do merikan shetifa on the pot. Is that true? V'hatanya. We have a baraita in Masechet Terumot. It's a Tosefta. Kedera shebishel ba basar lo yibashel ba chalav v'im bishel benoten tam. Terumah lo yibashel ba chulin v'im bishel benoten tam. If you have a pot and you cooked meat in it, then you may not cook milk in it. And if you did, b'di avad, that depends if there's taste. Taste the, you could give it to a non-Jew to taste. If you have, you cooked a dairy dish in it, and so you give it to someone, do you taste any meat in here? If the non-Jew says, yes, there is taste of meat, then it's no good. If there's no taste, so little of the meat inside, then it's okay. That's classic cases of koshering pots. Then the next case in that Tosefta is terumah. Terumah is kosher, but only to kohanim. Regular people cannot have terumah. So if you have a pot and you cook terumah in it, do not cook chulin in it. And if you did, now can a non-kohen eat it? Again, it depends on if it's noten tam. If someone, you could ask a kohen to taste it. Does he taste the food of the terumah that was cooked in it before? What does that mean? That you, in between terumah and chulin, you have to purge the pot, like we do. But for meat and milk, for Pesach, you have to boil the pot in boiling water to remove all the taste that's absorbed inside. So therefore, terumah also should require purging, should require hag'alah. So this is a very important source here, because at this point, we are assuming that hag'alah, boiling in hot water, which we do today to kosher a pot, is the same as the shetifa and merika that the Torah talks about. When you cook a korban in a pot, you have to do shetifa or merika. But shetifa and merika is not the same as the word hag'alah. We say hag'alah for taking out that absorbed thing through boiling water. Shetifa and merika literally means scouring, which means scrubbing with something to get the dirt off, and washing. Merika is like just washing, regular washing. Sounds like with cold water. And so at this point, we're assuming that's the same thing, but now we're going to learn in the following answers that actually it's two different processes. Amar Abaye, la sricha ela lidamar mor, bishav miksat keli taun medika ushtifa kol hakli, ha teruma lo sarich ela mekom bishul. So this is going to be a few answers. Abaye says there is a difference between these two processes, which is related to what we just said, that if you cook in something in part of a keli, then if it's a korban that you have to do medikan shtifa, and you only use part of a vessel, you only have to do medikan shtifa. You nevertheless have to do medikan shtifa on the whole thing. So when it comes to korbanot that are cooked in a pot, you have to wash the whole thing, even if you only use part of it. But for teruma, you only have to wash the part, the place where it was cooked in. So that is one distinction between the koshering that you do for teruma. That's just about the koshering, is taste of this teruma in it. So you have to, if you're not going to use it, you don't have to. Or if you're going to, let's say Kohen, only Kohen is going to use it. Okay, Kohen can use it for anything, and only the Kohen is going to eat it. But if you want to use it for cholin, again, then let's say Kohen says, I'm only going to use this for teruma. You don't have to kosher it. You could use teruma again and again. So you don't have to kosher it. You only have to kosher it if you're going to use it for cholin, and then regular people are going to be eating it. So for teruma, that is the law of regular hagala. And for that, you only have to do hagala on that spot. According to this, that's not halacha l'maaseh, but you only have to do it on that spot. So we see there's one distinction between the laws of shetifan medika. You have to do on the whole thing, no matter what, and hagala has to be can be only on that spot. That's one answer. Rava Amar la sricha ela le'da'amar mor b'mayim velo b'yayin velo b'mazug ha afilu b'yayin v'afilu b'mazug. Rava says another distinction, that when we talk about the medikan shetifa, there the masters taught it has to be done with water and not with wine, with water and not even diluted wine. The medikan and shetifa for korbanot has to be done with pure water. However, for cleaning a vessel for hagala that we do for teruma, that even if you do it with wine, even if you do it with diluted wine, you can kosher and get the taste out of it in that way as well. A third distinction, Rabba bar Ula Amar, La Siricha Ela de Amar Mor, Mirika Ushtifa Besonen, Ha Afilu Bechamin. This is the main one that really shows that these are two totally different processes. That where the distinction is that which the master said. When you do medikan shetifa, it's with cold water, whereas to remove the taste of the teruma has to be with boiling water. And that's a fundamental distinction. So we see that when you want to do hagala, in order to kosher something, you see that teruma law was the same, was put back to back with basar bechalav. So same thing, if you have cooked meat in something and now you want to use it for dairy, then you have to boil it in water. You don't have to boil in water if you don't want to cook dairy. If you want to keep cooking meat in it, so go ahead, keep cooking meat in it. But then you want to use it for something else, then you have to boil it. So boiling, that's for getting the taste out for something not kosher. That's what we're talking about teruma. Medikan shetifa is not about the taste. It could even be with cold water. And the point is that you have to do it. It's an independent mitzvah that the Torah says. Just like for a garment, you're not eating the garment, you're not putting anything else on the garment. Blood that goes in the garment, you have to wash. You can't take it out of the courtyard. You simply have to wash it. It's its own mitzvah. And so too, for the pot that you cook korban in it, there's an independent mitzvah that you have to do, this washing. It's with cold water. You scour it, you wash it with cold water. It's a totally different mitzvah with different requirements. This answer of Rabba bar Ola fits with the opinion, we're going to see on the next daf that there is a machloket about this. It fits with the opinion that says medikan shtifa is in fact with cold water, so then koshering for teruma is going to be with hot water. But there is another opinion that says that merika is actually with hot water. You do that scouring that we mentioned, you have to do with hot water, and then the shetifah is with cold water. So that for pots that you're using for korbanot, you have to do a two-step process, first hot water and then cold water. Well, in that case, that's the same as terumah, because you said terumah also is hot water. So what would be the difference? And the answer is, it's the extra rinsing. When it comes to terumah or a meat pot or anything else, then you just boil it in hot water, and that gets all the taste out. If it's a korban that you're cooking in a pot, then you have to do mirikah with hot water, and you also have to put it into wash it with cold water afterwards. We're going to see on the next daf that we're going to again compare these two sets of laws of mirikah shetifah versus koshering pots and pans, and we're going to see that they are in fact compared. And based on the comparison, the Rambam does rule that when you kosher something in hot water, you have to put it in cold water afterwards. And many people still do this today when they boil their spoons or whatever. Before Pesach, they take it from the hot water and the boiling water, and they put it also into cold water. So this is the source of that halacha, even though at this point it's actually mentioned about a separate thing of korbanot only. The pots you have to put in boiling water and then in cold water. But we're going to see on the next page there is this machloket about this, whether we're going to bring these two areas of halacha, are they totally separate, or are we going to compare them together? And if you do bring them together, then the laws of putting into cold water after also apply to Hag'alah that we do till today. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.